hypergeometric groups? Dr. Sandeep.
But thank you very much, Manoj and Anupam both, for the invitation, and of course, for this very nice initiative. So for bringing all the group theories on a single platform, and we all can listen each other, means what people are doing around, and also means that YouTube channel is also very useful. Actually, means we can go back and just listen in our spare time. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here. So today, as I have said, actually means I will give a survey of I will just discuss the progress made so far on the question which was actually asked by Peter Sarnak about deciding the arithmeticity and thinness of some hypergeometric groups. Yeah, before discussing this arithmeticity question about hypergeometric groups, let's first define means what are the hypergeometric groups. So for that, we need to start with hypergeometric differential equations. So just fix this notation. Theta is this differential operator, z times d by dz. And alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n, beta 1, beta 2, beta n are complex numbers. Then we write, so this is the notation, d alpha beta denotes the following operator, means theta plus beta 1 minus 1 times theta, dot dot theta plus beta n minus 1 minus z times theta plus alpha 1 dot dot theta plus alpha n. And you expand this bracket, you see easily that the highest coefficient polynomial is z to the power n times 1 minus z times, okay, so if you just expand this bracket, then it is clear, right? So coefficient of theta to the power n is what? Theta to the power n is 1 minus z. Z comes here from here and 1 comes from here. And theta is z by d, z times d by dz. So we get that 1 minus z times theta to the power n will be highest degree term, right? So in particular, if you write in the form of d by dz, then this is actually z to the power n times 1 minus z times dn dzn plus p1 z to the power n minus 1. And you can understand like z to the power n minus 1 dn minus 1 dz n minus 1 is coming from theta to the power n minus 1, right? So yeah, all these coefficients are polynomial because theta is just d by z times d by dz. And consider the hypergeometric differential equation d alpha beta w is equal to 0 on the Riemann sphere, which is nothing but just C union infinity. And it is clear from the definition of d alpha beta, from the notation, that d alpha beta w is equal to 0. This differential equation has singularities at z is equal to 0 and z is equal to 1. Right, and just by using the transformation z going to 1 by z, one can check easily that z is equal to infinity is also a singular point for this differential equation d alpha beta w is equal to 0. And those points 0, 1, and infinity are singular points for this differential equation. And even bit more is true, means those singularities are actually regular singularities for this equation. And regular singularity basically means that suppose this polynomial is a1z and this polynomial p1z times z to the power n minus 1 is a2z and so on. This polynomial p and z is a and z. So a point z is equal to z naught is said to be a regular singularity for this differential, for a differential equation. First of all, if that point is a singular point, means like highest coefficient polynomial vanishes at that point z is equal to z naught. And if we take the quotient, like ith coefficient is, suppose the polynomial aiz is the ith coefficient, so aiz by a1z, the highest degree term polynomial, that has a pole at z is equal to z naught of degree at most I. That condition is there, right? So in this case, it is immediately clear that 0 and 1 are regular singularities, right? Means in this case, aij is j to the power n times 1 minus z. If you divide, then z is equal to 1 is a pole of order 1, right? In this case, so and z is equal to 0. If you divide if you divide aiz by a1z, then we get that that has a pole of yeah, notation wise, just highest degree coefficient denote as a naught z and then a1 z. In this case, we'll see that means a1 z by a naught z has pole of order 1 at z is equal to 0. And then you can just verify that 0, 1, and infinity are regular singularities for this equation d alpha beta w is equal to 0. Yeah. Yeah, notation I'm not writing. So this is like highest degree coefficient you denote as a naught z and p1 z and z to the power minus 1. Suppose this is a1 z, then the coefficient is a2 z and so on. And then yeah. Now we'll use this differential equation to define the monodromy action of the fundamental group of p1 minus 3 point. P1 minus 0 and infinity, then you know that this fundamental group is nothing but just the fundamental group of figure 8, which is a free group and 2 generators. But if you consider 3 generators, there is one extra relation. So for that, fix a point z naught in C minus 0, 1. And suppose pi 1 is the fundamental group of P1 minus this 3 point based at point z naught. Then the monodromy action of pi 1 on the n-dimensional solution space V of this differential equation on a neighborhood U of z naught in P1C minus 0, 1 infinity is defined in the following way. Right. So basically, if you take a neighborhood U of z naught which does not contain the singular points of this differential equation, then this equation is regular in that neighborhood. Right. So therefore, its solution in that neighborhood of z naught is actually an n-dimensional vector space, right? So a basis of that solution space can be given by n linearly independent analytic functions, right? So now you have n linearly independent analytic functions which form a basis for the solution space of that equation in the neighborhood U of this regular point z naught, right? So now what we do, just to define the action of pi 1 on the solution space, which is of course, which is the n-dimensional complex vector space. So, and also we know that this pi 1 is generated by these loops, right? Like equivalence classes of these loops, G naught, G1, and G infinity. G naught is the loop around 0, G1 is the loop around 1. Means I'm saying the means like this is actually I'm denoting by G naught, G1 the equivalence classes of those loop path homotopy. Okay, so to define the action of pi 1 on this solution space V, actually it is enough to define the actions of the generator on that, right? And we have to make sure that that relation also holds, like G infinity, G naught, G infinity, G1, G naught should go to the identity element of the GLV, right? So to define, for example, to define the action of G naught, we already means just fix a set of n linearly independent analytic functions which form a basis for the solution space of that equation d alpha beta w is equal to 0. And suppose I'm taking just ith one, fi, for example, like suppose f1, f2, fn, those are the n linearly independent vectors which form a basis for that solution space. So just analytically continue fi along the loop G naught, right? And yeah, of course, you have to make sure that that analytic continuation is also a solution for that differential equation d alpha beta w is equal to 0. And by analytic continuous, you go along this loop G naught and come back to the point Z naught. Then you get that Fi means corresponding to Fi, you get another analytic function Hi, right? Which is solution of that differential equation d alpha beta w is equal to 0 in that local neighborhood U of Z naught. right? So you can write that HI as linear combinations of those n linearly invariant functions, right? F1, F2, Fn. And that can be done for all I between 1 to n. So that way we get that corresponding to G naught, we actually get a n cross n matrix, right? And similarly, corresponding to G1, we get a matrix in GLNC, you can say, or GLV. And similarly, corresponding to G infinity also, we get an element of GLV. And like, yeah, of course, when we fix a basis, we can realize that linear operator of V as the n cross n matrix. So this is how X1 of pi1 and the solution space is defined. So we have actually a representation of pi1 inside GLV. The representation means which I just described is called the monodromy representation of pi1, and this row of pi1, which is of course a subgroup of GLV, is called the monodromy group of this equation, hypergeometric equation, right? And of course, like the monodromy group of the differential equation is defined up to conjugation, right? Because if I take another basis for that solution space, I get some other subgroup. But those two groups, which we get from this equation, the alpha beta w is equal to 0, they will be conjugate to each other, right? So monodromy group is defined up to conjugations. Yeah, just a minute. I'm really sorry for. I don't know what.
You can.
Yeah, I am just. I'll just rerun and maybe something. I'll just.
You have to probably stop presenting and restart that.
Oh, yeah, correct. I need to stop. No?
Yeah. Yeah, now you can. Yes.
Okay. So. Yeah. Somehow it is not. Once I am making full screen, but okay. Just a minute. Okay. Yeah. I'm really sorry for this.
Yes. It's fine now.
So okay. So yeah. Yeah. So I just now define the monodromy representation and also define the monodromy group.
Sandeep,
So now,
could you please recall this definition of what is it? Pi1 is a fundamental group, but
pi1 is the fundamental group of P1 minus 0, 1, infinity. So if I remove infinity from P1C, then I get the complex plane. Then again, I'm removing two more points, 0 and 1. So basically, I'm getting this pi1 is actually the fundamental group of C minus 2 points. And that is same as fundamental group of figure 8. So basically that pi1 is a free group on 2 generators, but here I'm considering 3 generators, like the loop equivalence class of the loop around 0, around 1, and around infinity. So I have this one relation, like G infinity G1 D naught is equal to 1.
Okay, thank you.
And I defined just now the action of pi1 on the solution space, which is basically n-dimensional vector space of that differential equation, d alpha beta w is equal to 0. So that way I get a representation of pi1 inside GLV. That representation is called the Mondramy representation of pi1, and rho pi1, the image of pi1, which is a subgroup of GLV, that is called the Mondramy group of this equation. So now, means a very nice characterization of Mondramy group is given by Livell. So let's say I'm going to describe that. So the Mondramy group of hypergeometric equation is defined up to conjugations, and it is also called the hypergeometric group. So by a theorem of Livell, actually he obtained this theorem in his thesis at Amsterdam. If alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n, beta 1, beta 2, beta n are complex numbers such that alpha j minus beta k is not an integer for all jk from 1 to n, then the Mondramy group, let's denote now that as gamma alpha beta, this hypergeometric equation d alpha beta w is equal to 0. Just remember that d alpha beta, this differential operator, is defined this way. Like theta plus beta 1 minus 1 dot, 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 theta plus beta n minus 1 minus z times theta plus alpha 1 dot, dot, and so on, and theta is z times d by dz. Yeah, so this Mondramy group gamma alpha beta, the hypergeometric equation, is a subgroup of GLNC generated by the companion matrices A and B of the following polynomials. Fx and Gx. A is companion matrix of the polynomial F, and B is the companion matrix of the polynomial G. Right. So there is a relation. From the differential equation, we get these numbers like alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n, beta 1, beta 2, beta n. And once you know that, the polynomial fx is nothing but product of x minus e to the power 2 pi I alpha j, and g is product of x minus e to the power 2 pi I beta j. All right. And just to recall that if you have a polynomial, then its companion matrix is just that n cross, suppose polynomial is of n degree, then the companion matrix is a n cross, companion matrix of that polynomial is a n cross n matrix, in which the lower diagonal entries are 1 and last column is negative of the coefficients, right? And all other entries are 0. So A and B are matrices of that kind, means they are companion matrices of these polynomials F and G. Then we get that the Mondramy group of this differential equation d alpha beta w, of course, up to conjugation only, that is defined, that is actually the subgroup of GLNC generated by these two matrices A and B, where A is companion matrix of this polynomial, B is companion matrix of this polynomial. And the Mondramy representation of pi1 is defined by sending G infinity to A, G naught to B inverse, and G1 to A inverse B. G naught is the loop around 0, G infinity is the loop around infinity, and G1 is the loop around 1. Right, so this is how Mondramy group is defined. So Mondramy group of that differential equation is actually just a subgroup of GLNC, which is generated by two matrices A and B, which are basically companion matrices of some polynomials. And of course, like if you know the polynomials F and G, then you know the differential equation, right? You know the differential equation d alpha beta w is equal to 0, and if you know the differential equation, then you know the polynomials also. Right? So, and the only restriction we have that this characterization we get whenever means like whenever for this differential equation, alpha j minus beta k is not an integer for any jk varying from 1 to n. Right, and this condition ensures that these two polynomials F and G has to be co-prime. They should not have any common root. Right? Yeah. So basically now the Mondramy group of hypergeometric differential equation is a subgroup of GLNC.
One question. Sorry, Sandeep, one question. These polynomials do not give us alpha i's, for example, how do we recover alpha is from the polynomial?
No, I mean, here there is no restriction. They can be complex numbers also.
Right, right. So
Alpha
if you
j,
want to
alpha j,
recover the
beta j.
differential operator from here, how do I get hold of alpha i's or beta j's?
No, if you have this polynomial f and g, then they have the roots, right? Means if you know all the roots
Yeah,
of this
so e
polynomials.
power 2 pi I alpha j is a root, but alpha j can be modified by some integer, no? To give me the same root.
Yeah, that's what I said. I mean, like, yeah, correct. Means we not exactly the same, but we'll get a conjugate of. Oh, actually.
So, my question is just simple.
No,
I
yeah,
can
correct. I
modify
understand.
alpha j by an integer to get the same root of the polynomial, but to get the differential equation, I need alpha i's and beta j's sort of uniquely. Because here I don't have any ambiguity. I have to have, or there is some kind of equivalence between such equations. I don't know. Do you understand my question?
Yeah, I got correct. I got it.
Because you said you can determine the equation.
No, it's like once you know the differential equation, then you know the Mondromi group.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, for the converse means like up to integral shift.
So you can recover alpha i's and beta j's up to integral translates as far as I can see.
Yeah. No, basically one thing, not exactly like if you have, actually by this what I mean, if you have a polynomial f and g, right? If you know the polynomials f and g, then you know the matrices a and b. No, if you know the polynomials, then you know its roots, and then corresponding that roots, you'll get a differential equation, right? For which the Mondromi group is given by is a subgroup of GLC generated by these two matrices a and b.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, thank you. Go
so
ahead.
So maybe not, yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead. We will see later.
Yeah, so now we have this nice characterization of the hypergeometric group or Mondromi group of that hypergeometric differential equation. And now next question is, like, we know that the hypergeometric group is actually a subgroup of GLNC. Then one can naturally think that means, yeah, what is Zariski closure of that hypergeometric group inside GLNC? So that also has been, yeah, that is very nicely determined by Boykers and Heckman. So in this slide, we'll just discuss his result, their results. So we now consider Fg integer coefficient polynomials with constant term plus minus 1, so that the associated hypergeometric group gamma Fg is actually a subgroup of GL and Z. Then Boykers and Heckman showed that if Fg are self-reciprocal, that basically means that if A is a root, then 1 by A is also a root of F. And form a primitive pair. Primitive pair means like f and g cannot be a polynomial in x to the power k for k greater or equal to 2. Like form a primitive pair means like there does not exist any pair of polynomials f1 and g1 such that fx is f1 of x to the power k and gx is g1 of x to the power k for some k greater or equal to 2. Then depending on the constant terms of the polynomials Fg, the corresponding hypergeometric group gamma Fg preserves either a non-degenerate symplectic form omega or a non-degenerate quadratic form Q. Yeah, the condition is like whenever F0 is equal to Z0 is equal to 1, then gamma Fg is actually inside Sp omega Z, and the Zariski closure of gamma Fg is that symplectic group of that form omega. And if f0 by g0 is minus 1 and gamma fg is infinite, then gamma fg sits inside the integral points of orthogonal group of that quadratic form Q. So this primitivity condition is required to make sure that the Zariski closure is full group, but just because of like this self-reciprocal, we have to assume to make sure that means there is some means there are that symplectic form and quadratic form depending on the constant term of the polynomials, which will be preserved by the matrices A and B. Therefore, they are preserved by the hypergeometric group generated by those matrices. So basically, by self-reciprocal, you get that like our group has an action on V, right? So the group X on V star also, just by means you can, like, action of A can be defined as A goes to A transpose inverse, right? And because because of the rigidity condition, because we know that if the polynomial is self-reciprocal, then A and A transpose inverse will have exactly the same characteristic polynomials, right? So basically, we get that the action of this monotomic group on V is actually isomorphic to its action on V star. So V and V star are isomorphic, and so from there it follows that there is a bilinear form which will be preserved by the group gamma, and isomorphism, of course, that correspond to a non-degenerate bilinear form. So we get a non-degenerate bilinear form B, which will be preserved by this gamma FG, the subgroup of gamma and JLNC, which is generated by A and B, right? And means again, and also because of because F and G do not have a common root, and this primitivity condition is also used. Actually means that F and G having the not common root is enough for that. To say that the action of gamma on V and V star is actually irreducible. So from there we get that if you get one non-degenerate bilinear form preserved by gamma, then actually means means like it preserves unique bilinear form up to scalar multiple only. Like since it preserves B, it will preserve B transpose also. So B transpose has to be some scalar lambda times B, and from there we get that lambda has to be +1 or -1. And whenever F0 and G0 are 1, then you can we can easily get that lambda is equal to 1 is not possible. So in that case, we get a symplectic form, like B transpose will be B. Actually, B is the bilinear form which is preserved by gamma alpha beta. Yeah, gamma FZ. So that's how we get that, because of the self-reciprocal and like F and G are co-prime conditions. By using that, we get that this monotomic group actually preserves symplectic and quadratic forms, and then just by showing that that Jarsky closure of this hypergeometric group inside JLNC has exactly the same Lie algebra. Means that way they have showed that means this group gamma FG is Jarsky dense inside the symplectic group of omega or orthogonal group of Q, depending on the constant terms of the those polynomials F and G. Okay, so now we know that if F and G are integer coefficient polynomials with constant term +(-1), and they satisfy these two conditions, then the hypergeometric group is actually a subgroup, a Jarsky dense subgroup of SP omega Z in one case, and in this case, this is a subgroup of OQZ.
Sandeep, why are the Jarsky dense? Can you please explain? I didn't.
Jarsky dense. No, it's like this is clear that it will preserve a symplectic form in case when F0 is G0 is 1, and it will preserve a quadratic form when F0 is 1 and G0 is -1. And their Jarsky dense means actually means we have to go through their work. Basically means the idea is like they have showed that Jarsky closure has actually the same Lie algebra as that of SP omega in that case, and of orthogonal group in case of when F0 is 1 and G0 is -1.
So they show the Jarsky closure has the same Lie algebra,
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah. Means that is how they have showed that this is Jarsky dense, because finding a form preserved by A and B is really easy. Means that actually I explained that action on V is isomorphic to action on V star. So from there we get a form which will be preserved by A and B, means the generators of this hypergeometric group. And that is how, means just using this primitivity condition, they have showed that.
No, just another question. So, how actually can you indicate how they show the Zariski closure that has the same Lie algebra as that?
Actually, they have showed that they contain, means this Zariski closure will means like, yeah, basically they have showed that they contain like potent elements corresponding to all the roots, all possible roots.
Hmm.
So that way.
So this quadratic form is integral, right?
Quadratic form is integral because means yeah, we have already f and g are integer coefficient problems in this case.
Right.
Okay, so now we come to the question to determine the arithmeticity of this hypergeometric group. Well, so let's have this definition. Let this G be the Zariski closure of the hypergeometric group gamma Fg inside GLNC, and gamma Fg is actually because this holds in our case, we assume that gamma Fg is a subgroup of ZZ. Then we know that the gamma Fg is called arithmetic, means gamma Fg will be arithmetic in fact if it has finite index in GZ, and thin if it has infinite index in GZ. In both cases, gamma has to be Zariski dense inside G. So now we now address the following question. So that we came to know from Sarnak that determine the pairs of polynomials Fg. Yeah, I have to be careful, as Manish pointed out. Determine actually means if you know this Fg, then you know that corresponding to that there is a differential equation. Then, but we have to find them. It's not we do not get the unique differential equation, but we'll get several differential equations like means corresponding to each alpha plus n and beta plus n for any integer n. So anyway, determine the pairs of polynomial Fg so that the associated hypergeometric group gamma Fg is an arithmetic or a thin group. So here's an answer to Sarnak's question in symplectic case. So note that in the case F0 is equal to G0 is equal to 1 and the Boykers and Heckman conditions, that is co-prime and self-reciprocal, ensure that the degree n of the polynomials f and g must be an even number, right? Otherwise -1 will be common root for f and g both, but we have already assumed that they are co-prime. So it immediately follows that whenever these conditions for this pair f and g are satisfied, then the degree of these polynomials has to be even number. We give a sufficient condition on the pairs of polynomials fg of degree at least 4 so that the associated hypergeometric group gamma fg is arithmetic. So this is the theorem we obtained. So if the leading coefficient c of the difference polynomial f minus g satisfies this condition, mod c greater lesser equal to 2, then the hypergeometric group gamma fg associated to the pair fg is an arithmetic subgroup of the corresponding symplectic group. Like, yeah. So if you have f and g integer coefficient polynomials which satisfies all the conditions of Boykers and Heckman, then just by looking at the leading coefficient of the difference polynomial f minus g, one can say immediately that if the leading coefficient is +-1 or +-2, leading coefficient of the difference polynomial is +-1 or +-2, then one can immediately say that the group is arithmetic. But we'll see soon that leading coefficient bigger than 2, of course, does not mean that the group is thin. We don't have any such criterion for this difference polynomial, where the difference polynomial has a leading coefficient at least 3. We'll see some examples. So here is one remark that our theorem actually holds even for n is equal to 2, and in that case, you know that f will be a polynomial of this type, g will be a polynomial of that type, and c is basically a1 minus b1. And in that case, we write the companion matrix of f. This is A is the companion matrix of f, B is the companion matrix of z. And in that case, A inverse B is this matrix, 2 cross 2 matrix, which entries are 1, C, 0, 1, and AB inverse will be 1, 0, C, 1. And it is well known that for C is equal to +-1 and +-2, gamma fg is actually gamma fg, which is the subgroup generated by A and B, is full of sp2z, and of course that is an arithmetic group whenever C is +-1 or +-2. And of course these two matrices generate a finite index subgroup of SL2Z that has been used in the proof of that theorem, proof of the last theorem. Let's quickly see some applications of our theorem. So for the case n is equal to 4, there are actually 111 pairs of all possible polynomials fg in Zx such that f0 is g0 is 1.
Hi Sandeep, can you indicate the how you prove there is a theorem of Venkatramana that you use? Can you indicate that? How do you prove it? I mean, some unipotent elements are going to be there in use.
Correct. Yeah.
Can you please indicate that?
Actually means like this theorem is stated like this way, and means in the same paper means we have stated a theorem like means basically the idea is used in this SP4 case. It is easy, means we can directly show that actually it intersects the unipotent upper triangular matrices in finite index subgroup, and it directly follows the arithmeticity directly follows from the just using the sales result. And like in general case, when n is bigger than 4, in that case we have used the theorem of Venkatramana, means which which is like I think 88 or 89's paper, I mean, that was in Journal of Algebra. It basically means if n is bigger than 4, then we showed that actually gamma fg contains elements corresponding to the highest and second highest roots. Yeah. So Pralay.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So in SP4 means just translation from 4 to general n, that was easy. Means in that case we had used that the group actually contains important elements corresponding to the highest and second highest root group. Just showing those two elements are inside this gamma fg, the arithmeticity follows because it is already given to be dense, Jaisky dense. For n is equal to 4, there are 111 pairs of all possible polynomials fg in Zx such that f0, g0 is 1. Both of them are products of cyclotomic polynomials, have no common root, and form a primitive pair. Here just we use the fact that f and g are product of cyclotomic polynomials, and this would satisfy the Boyker-Shechtman's condition. So there are exactly 111 pairs. And Peter Sarnak actually raised the question of thinness of these groups. What it follows from the theorem directly that among these 111 pairs, there are 60 pairs for which the difference polynomial f minus g has leading coefficient less or equal to 2 in absolute value. And hence, the hypergeometric groups gamma fg associated to these pairs are arithmetic. Notice that in the theorem, we do not assume that the roots of f and g are roots of unity. Means we just assume that they are integer coefficient polynomials and they satisfy the conditions of Boyker and Shechtman. As an application of that theorem, you see that more than half of these 111 pairs satisfy the conditions of our theorem, and their arithmeticity follows. So basically means this is the table for those 60 pairs which satisfy the conditions of that theorem. So in all these cases, we can see actually that leading coefficient of this polynomial f minus g, the difference polynomial, is either plus minus 2 or plus minus 1. So the arithmeticity follows. So there are 60 pairs, and we have then a list of primitive symplectic pairs of polynomials of degree 4, which are products of cyclotomic polynomials, to which the theorem does not apply. Of course, here you can see that the leading coefficient of the difference polynomial is bigger than the absolute value of the leading coefficient is bigger than 3. Means bigger than 2 means it's greater or equal to 3. These cases. So our theorem directly cannot be applied to these cases. So we'll see that actually as of now we know the arithmeticity or thinness of almost all the groups of this second table, only few are remaining. So I will tell you that which are remaining and how many are still open. Yeah, so with that, I will come back to the second table shown after a couple of slides. So now, we discussed the Mondomi associated with Calabi-Yau threefolds. Basically, means it had some applications in algebraic geometry. So the case n is equal to 4 and fx is equal to x minus 1 to the power 4 has generated much interest. And in this case, we consider G as the product of cyclotomic polynomials such that G0 is 1, G1 is non-zero, just to make sure that f and g are co-prime, and Fg form a primitive pair. Note that in this case, gamma Fg is of course a subgroup of SP4G. And there are total 14 pairs of polynomials satisfying the above condition. Like f is fixed to be x minus 1 to the power 4 and G is product of all possible cyclotomic polynomials such that G0 is 1 and G1 is not equal to 0 and Fg form a primitive pair. So we get that there are 14 such possibilities for Z. So by the work of Candelas et al., the hypergeometric groups corresponding to these 14 pairs of polynomials are the Mondomi groups obtained from a family of Calabi-Yau threefolds. Actually means, yeah, for that 14 groups, then actually means like people started thinking about this arithmeticity question just to study these 14 groups only. Means, yeah, for which f is x minus 1 to the power 4 and g was as described here. So first, yeah, Brav and Thomas actually showed that the 7 of these 14 hypergeometric groups are thin. Actually, they use a ping pong argument to show that the hypergeometric groups associated to these pairs are either a free group or contain a free group of finite index, and hence they can't have finite index in SP4Z. Right? Because the cohomological dimension of SP4Z is 2 and free groups have 1. And using the theorem and its proof, we showed that 3 of the remaining 7 hypergeometric groups are arithmetic. And later I actually showed that the remaining 4 groups are arithmetic. And we showed that these 7 groups actually contain enough unipotent elements so that they have finite index in SP4Z. So therefore, 7 of the 14 hypergeometric groups associated to the Calabi-Yau threefolds are arithmetic and the other 7 are thin. So that those 14 cases are completely solved. So yeah, these are the groups, and here we can see easily, these are the 14 groups, what I just described here. In this case, f is x minus 1 to the power 4, f is this polynomial, and g is this polynomial, f minus g is also mentioned here. So we can see the first example actually directly satisfies our criterion of our theorem, right? The leading coefficient of f minus g is -2, so arithmeticity directly follows from our theorem. But in other cases, the leading coefficient, the absolute value of the leading coefficient is greater or equal to 3. So our theorem is not directly applied, but we could use the proof in some sense in showing that number 11, arithmeticity of number 11 and 13 also follows. And there are some other cases, no? Like here the leading coefficient is -6, but is still the associated hypergeometric group is arithmetic. And 5 is even more, means even the directly means we cannot apply the proof also in this case, proof of that theorem, because here GCD is 4. So there is some connection. So that also I will discuss that why we cannot use the proof in proving the arithmeticity of this case. So here the leading coefficient is -4. Not only that, actually the GCD of leading coefficient is also 4. Means in some sense that is very big number. So, but still the associated hypergeometric group is arithmetic. So these are the 7 arithmetic and 7 thin groups from that. Recall that in the second table we have listed the 51 pairs of polynomials for which the absolute values of the leading coefficients of the difference polynomials are greater or equal to 3, and hence they do not satisfy the hypothesis of our theorem. it follows from these two results that 12 of these 51 pairs correspond to arithmetic groups. So basically, like if you consider the pairs fx, gx, and f of minus x and g of minus x. So basically means the hypergeometric group generated by the companion matrices of the polynomials f and g, another hypergeometric group that is generated by companion matrices of the polynomial f minus x, g minus x, then you can see that they are actually conjugate to each other. So if you know the arithmeticity of gamma fg, then you know the arithmeticity of gamma f minus x, g minus x also. So actually, just by using that means like that is called they are equivalent up to some scalar shift, and here the scalar is like half 1/2. So actually, just by using the scalar shift, like if the group corresponding to fx/gx is a scalar shift of the group corresponding to the polynomials f minus x, g minus x. So if corresponding to fx/gx is arithmetic, then corresponding to f minus x, g minus x is also arithmetic. So yeah, actually applying that, we get that 12 of those 51 pairs correspond to arithmetic groups. And also it follows from Brov and Thomas result that 13 of the remaining 39 groups are thin. Again, the same means the gamma fg is arithmetic or thin corresponding to fg if and only if gamma corresponding to f minus x, g minus x is arithmetic or thin. So that way. And then I showed actually that 15 of the remaining 26 monodromic groups are arithmetic. So 11 are still remaining. So it follows from the equivalence of the pairs fx, gx, and f minus x, g minus x that the question to determine the arithmeticity or thinness of the remaining 11 groups is actually open only for 6 pairs. And now, depending on some experiments done by David, it is guessed that 3 of these 6 groups might be thin and the other 3 might be arithmetic. And proving him right, actually my student Shashank Singh had showed the arithmeticity of one of the 6 groups, and now we are trying to actually prove that whatever observation David had, that is true. So basically only 5 cases are remaining. It's up to equivalence of fx, gx, and f minus x, g minus x.
So, Sandeep, can you please tell us about the techniques that the way you prove their arithmetic?
Yeah, I'm coming to that point actually. Okay. Yeah. In the next slide, means basically the idea is same as means this is Zariski dense. Either we show that they contain the important elements corresponding to highest and second highest root. Then we are done, right? Or we just show that they intersect the important upper triangular matrices or important lower triangular matrices in a finite index subgroup, then also we are done. So basically means we have tried to show that these groups actually contain enough unipotent elements.
No, that second highest and second highest root, how we are done? Can you please say a few words about that?
And how to get that actually means
Okay, please go ahead. I mean, you can tell me later.
Okay, yeah, we can discuss after concept.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll tell. And maybe the next slide, whatever I've written, it will make more clear the method of our proof. So so let's just quickly discuss this degree 6 cases, and there is actually motivation behind that. So it means a computation shows that there is a total of 40 pairs of degree 6 co-prime polynomials fg, where f is exponential to the power 6, g is a product of cyclotomic polynomials, g0 is 1, g1 is non-zero, and fg form a primitive pair. And the same Boykar's and Ekman conditions, where f is fixed to be exponential to the power 6. Then a natural question arises whether the 40 symplectic hypergeometric groups corresponding to these pairs of polynomials follow the same dichotomy between arithmeticity and thinness that holds for the 14 symplectic hypergeometric groups corresponding to the pairs of degree 4 polynomials fg, where fx is x minus 1 to the power 4 and g is as described above. Like, at least we'll come to know that if they follow the same similar pattern, it's like half of them are arithmetic and other half are thin. So as a result, we actually obtain the following theorem. So this is very recent, where we proved that 18 of these 40 hypergeometric groups are actually arithmetic. And here I will discuss a criterion that has been used in proving the last theorem. That gives it's extended criterion for arithmeticity of symplectic hypergeometric groups. What I got with Venkatramana. The following proposition actually easily follows from our paper, and in fact, this statement of this proposition is actually mentioned as a remark just for completeness, because this can be referred and this proposition can be used also. So we write down this proposition explicitly, and also we give a proof of that. Like we gave in the same paper, means we proved this proposition also. So this proposition tells that if f and g are pairs of degree n pair of degree n polynomials which are products of cyclotomic polynomials, do not have any common roots, form a primitive pair, and have the constant term equal to 1. Yeah, and of course these conditions again ensure that they must be even. Let the leading coefficient of the difference polynomial f minus g has the absolute value greater or equal to 3. Let E1, E2, En be the standard basis vectors of Qn over Q, and I be the n plus n identity matrix. Let A and B be the companion matrices of the polynomials Fg. This V is the vector, means C is A inverse minus B, right? N plus n matrix. So I'm just subtracting identity matrix from the C minus identity of En. So basically, means. Yeah, if you see that C is actually n cross n matrix whose diagonal entries will be 1, and it will have only the last column entries will be non-zero. Other entries are 0. So C minus identity is basically this C minus identity of En is actually the last column of this C minus I. This vector V is the last column vector of this matrix C minus identity, where C is A inverse B. Then we get that if there exists an element gamma in gamma fg such that the three vectors v, gamma inverse v are linearly independent, and the coefficient of En in gamma v has absolute value, either 1 or 2, then the hypergeometric group gamma fg is arithmetic in the corresponding symplectic group. So basically, in this case, means what we just require that suppose you have one element gamma in gamma fg, means actually if you have a word gamma in AB such that gamma v has, if you apply gamma on that vector v, if gamma v has leading coefficient plus minus 1 or plus minus 2, and also this linear independent conditions should be satisfied, then the arithmeticity of gamma fg actually follows. So we used some computer program in doing that. So it follows from the last proposition that to show the arithmeticity of a symplectic hypergeometric group, we only need to find an element gamma in gamma fg that satisfies the hypothesis of the proposition. You recall that gamma is a word in AB, the companion matrices of F and G respectively. Verifying the criterion of the last proposition with one gamma after another doesn't seem an easy task. Right? So one can ask whether it is possible to write a computer program that can help in finding an appropriate gamma. So the answer to this question is yes. And in the same paper, we also provide a SAYS math program that finds a gamma if there is any. Of course, means like suppose the group is not going to be arithmetic, or even if it is arithmetic, then we may not get such gamma, right? It is not true that we will get gamma, but whenever, means like this program actually helps us in finding if there is such gamma of some particular length satisfying the hypothesis of the proposition. So we use this program to show the arithmeticity of 18 of the 40 hypergeometric groups corresponding to this, where f is exponential 1 to the power 6. There are some limitations of this SAGE math program. So in the 22 cases whose arithmeticity or thinness is unknown, we have applied the SAGE math program with k is equal to 15. Means this k is basically length of that word gamma, what we get in AB. And like for k is equal to 15 also, now if you have normal computer and you just run the program, so it may take maybe it may go on, means like it will keep checking if there is such gamma, means but sometime like in some of those examples it took around 2 days. So there's some that limitation is there, means we cannot just wait of getting that. So in those 22 unknown cases, 18 cases we already know the arithmeticity. For the other 22 cases, we don't have any idea about arithmeticity or thinness. But in that cases, like up to k is equal to 15, we are not able to find if there is any such gamma. Right? So this shows in particular that if one of the corresponding groups is arithmetic and some gamma exists, then such a gamma has to be written as a product of at least 16 matrices in A, B, A inverse, B inverse. We stopped at k is equal to 15 because of the runtime of the computations. And among them, also, there are also 5 cases for which arithmeticity cannot be proved through the proposition. In these cases, the GCD of the coordinates of the vector v is larger than 2, so which implies that no such gamma exists. Right? So the GCD of the coordinates of v is bigger than 2, so there will be no gamma. Means gamma v will always have the entries which will be multiple of that GCD, right? So that's why I was saying that in one of the case where GCD was 4. So it is not possible to find such gamma. Means actually there is no such gamma. For example, in that case where GCD was 4, GCD of the entries of V was 4. So then comes this arithmetic, like arithmetic question. Like once you know that this is a finite index, then one can of course think of like what is the index of these groups inside SP and Z. So there are some people who have computed the index. Yeah. Do I have some 5 minutes at least? There's some technical. Manoj?
Yeah, Sandeep, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so actually maybe this part I can skip. So Huffman and Fan is starting. They have computed the index of the groups actually in like 5 of the 7 arithmetic groups. 7 is out of those 14 associated Calabi-Yau 3 points. And then for a finitely generated and Zariski-dense subgroup gamma in SP and Z, its arithmetic closure is defined as intersection of all arithmetic subgroups of SP and Z containing gamma. And in some cases, in some sense, arithmetic closure of gamma is the smallest finite index subgroup of SP and Z that contains gamma. It follows that gamma is arithmetic in SP and Z if and only if gamma is equal to arithmetic closure of gamma, and in that case, both have the same index in SP and Z. So very recently, Detinko, Flannery, and Hulpke, they have used again an algorithm that is implemented in GAP to compute the index of arithmetic closure of gamma fg inside SP and Z by using the method of coset enumeration. And whenever gamma fg is arithmetic, the index of this arithmetic closure is actually the index of the hypergeometric group inside SP and Z. Now we discuss the orthogonal. So far we have been discussing the symplectic hypergeometric groups. Now we move to the orthogonal hypergeometric groups. So in this case, you remember that F and G are basically in F and G are integer coefficient polynomial. F and G are actually polynomials which are products of cyclotomic polynomials. F0 is 1, G0 is -1. So in that case, we know that the associated hypergeometric group preserves a quadratic form and they sit inside the corresponding orthogonal group as a Zariski-dense subgroup. So when the quadratic form Q had signature n-1, 1, Elena Fuchs, Mary, and Sarnak obtained actually 7 infinite families depending on n odd and greater or equal to 5 of thin hypergeometric groups. When the quadratic form Q has signature PQ, where P and Q are greater or equal to 2, 11 infinite families of arithmetic gamma FZ are given by Venkatramana. An example of thin gamma FZ in O22 is given by Elena Fuchs. I obtained 2 examples of arithmetic gamma FZ in O32 in that paper, which deals with the 14 hypergeometric groups of degree 5 with a maximally unipotent monodromy. These cases were inspired by the 14 symplectic hypergeometric groups associated to Calabi-Yau tripods. Actually means like corresponding to those 14 groups, if I take f is equal to x minus 1 to the power 5 and take G all possible products of cyclotomic polynomials such that Z1 is non-zero and G0 is minus 1. So so I started looking in that. I found that, and in that case also there are exactly 14 symplectic hypergeometric. Exactly 14 such pairs. Yeah, there are so many. So in that case, means out of those 14 pairs corresponding to x minus 1 to the power 5, I had showed that 2 of them are arithmetic. And in that case, actually, means frankly, I used the idea of Venkatramana only. Those my paper appeared earlier and his much later in 17. So yeah. And I could better understand this orthogonal case after reading his paper. So then, yeah. So to study the orthogonal hypergeometric groups, we first wrote down all possible pairs FZ up to scalarships of degree 5. This is the starting case. Degree 5 integer coefficient polynomials having roots of unity as their roots, forming a primitive pair and satisfying the condition f0 is equal to minus 1 and g0 is 1. Right? Like in that symplectic case, just to get that theorem, we first wrote down those 111 pairs, and we just saw that means what is happening means how the arithmeticity, like from one case to other case, if there is something common, just to guess. So later we just realize that actually arithmeticity follows as long as the leading coefficient of f minus g is plus minus 1 and plus minus 2. So having that in mind, we computed all the pairs corresponding to the degree 5 polynomials. So that f0 is minus 1 and g0 is 1, so that the corresponding hypergeometric group actually preserves a quadratic form and it sits inside that corresponding orthogonal group as a Riske-Dehn subgroup. And then try to answer the question to determine the arithmeticity or thinness of the associated hypergeometric groups gamma fg. Note that these pairs of the polynomials satisfy the conditions of Boykers and Heckman, and hence the associated hypergeometric group gamma fg is either finite or preserves a non-degenerate integral quadratic form Q on Z5, and gamma fg inside OQZ is a Riske-Dehn in the orthogonal group of that quadratic form. And it is clear that there are finitely many pairs of degree 5 integer coefficient polynomials having roots of unity as their roots, and among these pairs we find that there are only 77 pairs which satisfy the conditions of Boykers and Heckman. Yeah, and we note that the roots of the polynomials f and g interlace for the 4 pairs fg, and hence the hypergeometric groups associated with these pairs are finite by the result of the same result of Boykers and Heckman. Interlace means like if alpha betas are numbers between 0 and 1, such that like we can always arrange like alpha 1 is lesser equal to alpha 2 is lesser equal to alpha 3, and so on. Beta 1 is lesser equal to beta 2 is lesser equal to beta 3, and so on. So interlace means alpha 1 is lesser equal to beta 1 is lesser equal to alpha 2 is lesser equal to beta 2, or the other one like beta 1 is lesser equal to alpha 1 is lesser equal to beta 2, and so on. If any of those two conditions happen, in that case actually this hypergeometric group is actually a finite group. In that case also we get the bilinear form which is preserved by that, but in that case the quadratic form is positive definite if the roots interlace on unit circle. Means roots are AB, means alpha beta. I said that if A and B are of the form e to the power 2 pi I alpha and 2 pi I beta. The quadratic form associated to 17 pairs have signature 4, 1, and the thinness of gamma fg associated to 7 pairs of them follows from the result obtained by Fuchs, Mary, and Sarnak. And for the other 10, arithmeticity or thinness is still unknown. But yeah, this is the hyperbolic type of signature 4-1. The quadratic forms associated to the remaining 56 pairs have signature 3-2. The arithmeticity of gamma fg associated to 11 pairs follows from the result obtained by Venkatramana. And, the arithmeticity of gamma fg, what I just explained, that associated to other 2 pairs follows from the same result what I had obtained. And later we obtained the following theorem. This is with Jitendra Bajpai. So the hypergeometric groups associated to 23 pairs of the remaining 43 pairs are arithmetic. And the question to determine the arithmeticity or thinness of the hypergeometric groups associated to the remaining 20 pairs is still open. And yeah, so I will stop here so that we can. It's done. Thank you so much for listening me.
Thank you, Sandeep, for this very nice talk.
Thank you.
Time for interaction with the speaker. Please put forward your questions, comments, or suggestions.
Yeah, Pralay was asking about that. So